I actually went and met them, but I had worked with them for years. I don't know, is this backwards? So you'd have to see it this way, I guess. No, that's upside
I think it
down.
might
No?
be upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. That's the way. That would be the way it would have to go. Oops. I feel so discombobulated. Wait a minute. The other way. Oh, this will be the way. This will be the way here.
There we go.
See? So they're kids in Afghanistan. They actually call it the Border Free Center that they're in. So they're working on, programs of social uplift in a war zone. Planting trees, having a street school for kids, So anyway, they have their own situation, which is different from people in Israel and Palestine, but still, it's not that different. So their idea is that there's one blue sky above us, and they want peace under it. So I'm sure that's one thing we all agree on, some kind of way.
Well,
Okay, Facebook said that they're ready if we're ready.
Perfect.
Shall we start?
Great. Okay. Before we start, you said well. Was that you didn't think that, or did I mishear something? Or
Me or
I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell.
I said that's the goal.
That's the goal. Good. Good.
You know,
Good.
we
Good.
just want
Good.
people to
That's the other thing.
follow
My
with that.
hearing is not that good. So anyway, hopefully that won't be an issue. Because anyway, okay, good. I'm glad. Yeah. Okay. So I think we're good. You said Facebook's ready to start.
Yeah, they said they're ready if we're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think we're ready. So.
Okay, so step one, now you got to throw the on-the-air switch.
Right.
Is the light on over your shoulder?
It is.
Put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you're on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, thanks to our producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. So I'm excited and really grateful that we have two very special guests here tonight for what is a difficult topic, but I don't think it will be a difficult conversation. Or at least, we're going to find a lot of things that we do agree on or hope for when we talk about Israel and Palestine. So things have been very difficult there for a very long time, and especially difficult lately. So, like other things, sort of ebb and flow. So we are very grateful that we have here two students, actually both UB students, and I'm glad to have you meet each other. So we'll just go, it's the indigenous ways they go around the circle counterclockwise. So we'll start with Jenna Ayoub. Jenna is it the president, or what is the position?
Yeah, I'm the president
Yeah.
of the Students for Justice in Palestine at UB.
Right. So that is an obvious reason that you're a great candidate for talking about this. And then conversely, Galia Wechsler, also welcome, Galia.
Thank you.
Is with UB's Hillel chapter, right?
Yes.
So I know what's happening is there's a little delay in the video. So I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. Probably not, right? Yeah, there isn't. So we'll just sort of, yeah. So that's why I can't tell who was talking sometimes. So anyway, I think people will know. We'll catch up with each other with our talking and our thinking. Sometimes it goes even quicker. Anyway, so I'm very grateful that you've both agreed to come and talk about this, and I think it is, a difficult but important conversation. And so I'd like to start it off by thinking about what are the values that we want to bring into this conversation with us. So each of you, if you want, maybe we'll start again this time with you, Jenna, and then with you, Galia. So what's a value or a couple, you can even give a couple values that you're bringing in that you want us to really hold uphold in this conversation?
I would definitely say just open-mindedness, because sometimes you can just get so like caught up in what you think is going on and like what you've heard that you don't really listen or refuse to listen to the other side. So I think we're all coming into this with like a open mind, hopefully.
So open-mindedness, that is wonderful. That's a wonderful idea. And very important, I think it is, to really listening, right? That's why we were talking about focusing on the listening part.
Right.
So thanks, Jenna. That's beautiful. And Galia?
I think our goal lies a lot in finding common ground, because I think even though we come from different perspectives, we, at the end of the day, have a lot in common about this, and certainly more than anybody who is detached and who is not Jewish or Israeli or Palestinian. And I realized in this last round of tension that we probably are more able to be empathetic to each other's perspective than anybody who sees it in the news and forgets about it when it's over, because we can't detach ourselves from this. We are invested for the sake of our friends and our family and, a place that we have connection to. And I think that that's more important than I think this and you think that. And if we disagree, then it just is a non-starter. I think our common ground is the most important part.
Right. So common ground. So there's a lot of common ground, even as you're saying that. And certainly that it really brings us to the value, or actually two values that I really want to bring into this are truth and love. As Dr. King said, I believe that unarmed truth, it's on the bottom of my emails, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. So that truth, and truth, is a tricky thing. I mean, truth is far more, but so we'll try to hold to truth as much as we can. And there are different aspects of truth, so we don't all see the same aspect. That's why, like somebody said, the Tao of conversation, right? So you just build on the different parts of the truth that people have from different perspectives. And of course, love. Because, I think love makes the world go round. And it's why everyone cares so much. It's why it's so important. And it's why we're going to get there eventually. I just think we just need a lot of radical love to make it happen. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for both of those ideas. And it's a great way to start off the conversation. So I think our next piece of it, we were going to see, it's really on coping mechanisms. So, as this is going on, as you said, Galia, both of you, it's so emotional. Now, it's emotional for lots of people who aren't as invested as the two of you are. So I'm going to ask, what have you been doing to take care of yourself, of your families, as people are hearing about all, how things have been even, more difficult lately? How are you coping with it? So why don't you start, Galia, and we'll just.
It's definitely been difficult these past few weeks. It's kind of been two separate pieces. Of first, there's what's going on in the Middle East that's causing a lot of stress. And then there has been the wave of anti-Semitism that has kind of been reactionary to that has been an issue worldwide, all over the diaspora in the past couple weeks. So that's a different worry that I'm having. It's been tough. My friends and I all talk about it and how we kind of feel like we're in a sinking ship of, we're worried about our friends and family in Israel. And now that there's this 500% increase in anti-Semitism in the diaspora, we're worried about ourselves. And it's been very difficult. But at the end of we're just taking it one day at a time. I'm trying to take it one day at a time. Focus on, my friends, my family, my community, making sure that, everybody is safe and, taking care of our mental health and our physical safety. But it's definitely not been the easiest.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I'm sure it's been very hard. How about you, Jenna? What have you been doing to cope with everything going on?
Honestly, it's been a lot of just like leaning on the community and my family.
Mm-hmm.
It's been like nice to see like the community come together during all of this and to see like support from like different parts of the communities like that you didn't even know would come out and support. So just leaning on that and focusing on that and just like spreading the word and trying to educate. That's been like what's been getting me through it. That's what I've been kind of focusing on, is like educating and spreading the word as much as possible. And I feel like it's definitely been brought to more people's attention than ever before, which is amazing.
Right. And maybe well, we'll get to that. Before we move off of this question, I have to make a mention of my very favorite coping mechanism, which is, of course, keep breathing, which is, well, of course, we do it, but do we really do it? So the deep, slow breathing being probably the quickest and most accessible, and it can be very connected to the body-mind, putting the whole body-mind complex together, especially if we do any kind of repetition that's like a prayer, a short prayer, or an affirmation or anything like that. That's my favorite part of deep, slow breathing. So you can do it. Sometimes they call it square breathing. If you like breathing in, you say something to yourself, and then when you hold your breath, you say it to yourself again, and then you say it to yourself again twice as you're breathing out. So it's kind of that's one way of doing it. But sometimes even just being conscious of our breathing is relaxing enough. And the more we get more oxygen, it calms us physically. But also, if we are feeding our body and feeding our mind, our heart and soul, something that encourages us, uplifts us, reminds us of the things that gives us strength, that can be a good thing to do, especially in a point where it's very extreme, because there are other things, as you say, certainly friends and family and talking about it, and, hopefully maybe even this will be some part of that. Anyway, so I wondered too, what your feelings are about what's going on. How would you describe your feelings? When you're listening to the news or when you're thinking about what's going on. Maybe this time we'll start with Jenna.
It's definitely really upsetting. It's definitely really emotional and very frustrating. And definitely frustrating because this is obviously not the first round of like tension and problems happening over there. And it's just not hearing it much outside of the community that supports Palestine or supports Palestine is like difficult to not hear it from anyone else and just see like how there's it's almost like people are scared to talk about it in the news or scared to talk about it in like here in like America especially. So it's definitely like very frustrating, and it makes me I guess it just pushes me more to like spread the word and like make sure that people know what's going on and just keep everyone informed. It's definitely, I'm definitely scared because we have family back home and stuff. So it's definitely like just a constant like worrying and anxiety.
Right. That would be. So that's why I'm not kidding about the deep, slow breathing. And the other thing about it is the more you do it, the more it helps. So if you just pick, like I said, either a short prayer or an affirmation or a saying or just even a name, whatever it is, something that makes you feel the way you want to feel. And the other thing I'd say is the best is the enemy of the good. So in other words, there's lots of good things that you could pick, and don't sweat it too much of which one is the perfect one, or go switching them around too much too. Because the other thing is that when you're in that state of extreme fight, flight, freeze, right? upper brain shuts down. So we can't even think of it. That's how people don't think of doing it, or don't, you know what I mean? So you want to have something pretty automatic. So the more it becomes automatic, the more you'll do it when you need to do it. And I mean, when it's happening right there, and not just, you know what I mean? I mean those points of extreme fear or stress. So anyway, and so for you, Galia, what are some of your feelings as you hear the news and talk with people about
Definitely a roller coaster of all sorts of emotions. I'm doing my best to keep the bad ones to a minimum. It's been really nice to see the Jewish community, everybody even who is maybe not so vocal or not so involved on these issues, to come out of the woodwork and all support each other as we're kind of watching events unfold. Definitely a lot of frustration and anger, but also hope, because what Western media doesn't show, because it's not profitable to them, is how many demonstrations and rallies there have been in Israel, Palestine, of people from all different backgrounds, Israeli, Palestinian, Jewish, Muslim, coming together to demonstrate that we want peace and we want the violence to stop. And seeing those happen is really what's getting me through this.
I have to tell you both, I didn't think to mention this, but I will, that when I really became I'm a social worker and a spiritual seeker, but when I became a peace activist was through Women in Black. And Women in Black, do either of you know about it? It was started in Israel and Palestine by Jewish and Muslim women, and Israeli and Arab women, Palestinian women, in that part of the, in that area. I don't know exactly where actually, or exactly when, but in the 80s, because of all the violence, the women would stand together, Jewish and Muslim women in black. They would stand in a silent vigil, and they would hold signs that were about stopping the violence. Things like choose compassion, not sides, and all just about stopping the violence. And they didn't stop the violence, but they did create this movement worldwide. So Women in Black exists all over the world, and especially in various places where there have been a real hotspot. And we have our own Women in Black. So I found it in Scranton, Pennsylvania, through friends of mine, where I actually did a performance art piece, and I played a woman in black. And then I was interested, and I found out about it. So meanwhile, when I first moved to Buffalo, Women in Black meets right in Bidwell and Elmwood, and they started in the run-up to the war on Iraq. And so they've been meeting from noon to 1 every Saturday for these 19 years, I think. They started the second year, 2002. So 19 years of every single Saturday they've been there. And so I do go to it now. But so that, you don't have to be a woman or wear black. But actually that vigil is a quiet vigil, not a silent vigil. So people do talk to their neighbors or things, and there's plenty of signs. You're both welcome to come anytime and bring your friends. But anyway, so as you're saying, that was started in Israel and Palestine by Israeli and Palestinian women, and Jewish and Muslim women. So anyway, and let's talk a little about your experience there. So I want first, maybe let's talk about when you've been there and what your experience was when you were there. Now, first of all, so let's start with you, Galia, because I know you've been there, and we were talking about that a little bit. So,
right. So I've been there a few times, a couple times on organized trips to sort of travel around and experience the country, and also I've been with my mom to visit family. It is a beautiful place to visit. I'm sure that's something we can all agree on. It's beautiful, and the culture is beautiful, and the food is, better than anything you've ever eaten. And I also, going on organized trips, you get to hear a lot of different voices and different perspectives, and, the mission to educate and to bring American Jews who care about Israel into these different perspectives. So I remember when I was there a couple years ago, we spent a day traveling around the West Bank to hear different perspectives on, different Palestinian voices. We heard a couple of Jewish voices living in the West Bank. And I've been very fortunate to have those kind of experiences. And it's really shaped my ability to come to this conversation with, the understanding that everybody has their story, and everybody, is connected to this. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're so invested in peace and in talks like these, is because, when you're there and you're walking around day to day and you get to see stuff that doesn't make the news in the West, Israelis and Palestinians, for the most part, live together, enjoy life together, are neighbors, share good and meaningful experiences and friendships. And being able to see that with your own eyes and not just see Israel-Palestine through the lens of Western media is a really special thing.
So now, have you been there, Jenna?
I have not. No.
No. So I would just share that I have been there, but not. I only went there for 2 weeks in 1983. But anyway, which was a very different time, I would say, but it was still, there was plenty of military presence in a way that you don't see the military so much, in this country. It was jarring for me to see more military presence. And yet, first of all, I think we maybe have more military presence here now than we did in 83 ourselves. But the other thing is, what was wonderful to me was, I actually sat in the place where Jesus was supposed to be where he ascended. There's a footprint in the rock, and supposedly that is the place where he ascended. And it was in a chapel in a mosque, there on the other side of the Garden of Gethsemane, in that from the Mount of Olives, and there was well, I'm very interfaith. My dad was a German Jew, and I was raised in a more Christian. My mom was a Christian, but anyway, what I can say is, between the Muslim caretaker of the mosque, and there was a Jewish young man there too, and there was me, and we had a wonderful talk. And people do. There's so much that's shared in the Abrahamic religions together. There's so much. I know I feel it myself, and that was really how I found that I believe all paths lead to the same goal, because the teachings are so similar, even in other religions, and especially in religions that are branches off of the same tree. So that was the thing that really struck me. And the other thing I'll mention is that I saw in Jerusalem, and really all over, but especially in Jerusalem, every street corner there was some kind of something that happened that should remind us about truth and love, that should remind us about caring for each other, And so it was so ironic that and the more of a intense reminder it was, the more the place is actually both a reminder and also a hotspot is right now, So it's just the irony and the, just something to, maybe it's a handle for work, for working for change. But anyway, so can I ask, when I ask you, Jenna, if you want to share something of what your family there is experiencing and what they've told you about what you've heard about how
So
people are
we have,
experiencing there. Go
so I
ahead.
actually have two aunts in Gaza
Mm-hmm.
and a handful of cousins there as well. And we actually just got a call the other day from one of my cousins there that two of them, their whole apartment building or residential complex or whatever, had been like bombed, and they were told beforehand that it was going to happen, and that they went outside and watched their home just like crumble down to the ground. So that was definitely very like difficult to hear. Just we're always just like constantly worried about our family there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just like hard when you have like a physical connection in a place that's just known as like an open.
Sure. Of course. It's so scary.
Yeah.
So every time the phone rings,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Your heart stops a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now, did they have all their stuff was in there? Of course.
Yeah. So they
Yeah.
packed whatever they could, grabbed their kids, and now they're like with my aunt living. But majority of their belongings just went down with the building.
Right.
So
Right.
that's obviously upsetting to hear, and
Right.
just
Right.
like scary, like
So-
so unimaginable.
So scary and so heartbreaking. So
Exactly.
very hard. So very hard. How old are the kids?
They're pretty young. I haven't even met most of my cousins that live in Gaza, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So you said two aunts that you have?
Two aunts, yes. And then
So-
it was two cousins whose homes were
And so who are they to you? So is this your mom's or your dad's?
my dad's sisters, two
Your
of his
dad's
sisters.
sisters. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're in Gaza.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so does that both of the aunts live near each other?
Yes, they do.
Mm-hmm. So that
I mean,
helps.
it's a small area, so there's
Right. Well, that's
everything's
right.
yeah.
Right. Everything's near each other. Right. That is one thing about it. Yeah. So, what about some experiences? Do you have any experiences of people, family there, that you want to share that they've mentioned to you recently? Galia?
I have mostly been, in like fairly decent contact with my family, who have been spending plenty of their nights in bomb shelters. Now that things have mostly calmed down, things are getting back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
But, they're 7 hours ahead. So, like, at 4 PM, I'm seeing, like, all these texts, from my friends and family, like, night number or whatever in the bomb shelter, sleepover, trying to, like, make the best of a really, really awful situation. But when everything, when we were really in the thick of it a couple weeks ago, it was like every second, every time my phone went off, it was like, what happened? And there's this app where basically you can see if there's a rocket that is launched by Hamas. You can see if it was intercepted or landed in Israel and where. So obviously my phone was going off like crazy a couple weeks ago. And, I had several experiences like waking up in the morning or like waking up from a nap to my phone, going crazy. And I'm like, like checking the whole list of however many hundreds of rockets it was to make sure that none of it was where my family lives. And if it is in a city where my family lives, to call everybody and make sure everybody's okay. Mm-hmm. And that's something that people who don't have people over there will never understand, is the fear that we have when our phone goes off of like, what if something horrible happened?
So one thing that we didn't talk about discussing, but I think we have time, and I wonder if we want to talk about what are some of the contributing factors. And I want to say, because some of the contributing factors, I think, are really not the factors about the people who are living there, but more also about colonialism and the British role and all of that. And I want to say, as the daughter of a German Jew, who, by the way, I don't want to do too much talking in this, but I mean, I think I have partly something to share too, because I have a lot of feelings about it. My dad, well, first, when he was 15, he was told that by the Nazis in 1933, so that's early years, he lived in Munich, and he was told that if he didn't leave, they would be taking care of him, because he had beaten up the leader of the Hitler Youth. He had gone up at his gymnasium when he went up to get a prize for his relay race team. He refused to say Heil Hitler and things like that. He was a Zionist, and he would get on the bus and he'd hold a big newspaper up, and so that people would see it who were getting on the bus. So they let him know that, his time was limited and he should leave. So he did leave. He joined a kibbutz for a while. But anyway, and he, there was a little bit of a free rider problem, not too bad. But anyway, we also think that he might have joined the Haganah, which was the Jewish underground at the time. This is still pretty early years. It isn't, certainly, we're talking in the 30s, right? In the mid and late 30s. And he also, he joined, and that was when he went to agricultural school, and then later he had joined the British police, and then he joined the British Army. And then during the war, he was in the King's African Rifles, and he changed his name from Rosenbaum to Ross. But he was Franz Ernst Rosenbaum. But anyway, the reason I mention is because the colonialism and the sort of the peremptory deciding that was being done by colonial powers was one of the big factors. Because if when we read the history, the Jews and the Muslims, really, they were the people of the book together, right? They were allies. There is a book called The People of the Book that is a really fun book to read. Did either of you ever read it by chance? You might want to read it. My aunt, who is a practicing Jew convert through marrying my uncle, my dad's brother, gave me that book to read. I loved it. I really want to recommend it. It's just a fun book to read, and it shows about this book over time. It's written the story of this book that a library, what do they call it? A researcher was studying the book, and there were little things about the book that told you about the history of this book that was very, very old and had gone through in different places, and it was the story of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian people around this book. But anyway, I just feel like between that and between the trauma that Jews had experienced for so long, and I want that again, which was only increased. There were all the pogroms and all the years of trauma. That I think trauma is something that works in all kinds of ways. So there's historical trauma, and trauma is intergenerationally transmitted. So we know that. We've seen that. We've seen that with black people. We've seen it with Jewish people. We've seen it with indigenous people. That's something that happens. We're seeing it with Muslim people, and especially as things go on. So I feel like trauma is such a big piece of it, is that people can't hear each other and can't, find a way past the history of the things that have not really didn't happen in a good way. Does that make sense? And that some of it's just the difficulty, also the very, real difficulties of water shortage, land shortage, things like that. And so where other people and groups could help that have not really been able to help or haven't helped. I'm going to say I don't think that our sending over all kinds of weapons has been helpful.
Right.
The arms. In fact, there's just too many arms. Well, of course, this is the Western New York Peace Center talking. What do you think we think about arms? It's like, no, 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 no. It's just more fodder. It's just war profiteers. It's just, giving people the wrong tools. With the tools that people have sort of determine what they build, right? So if those are the tools that are being had, not how do we talk to each other, how do we learn to collaborate, how do we, do those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I want to ask each of you sort of your response or your thinking about what are some of the roots of the issues, and then we're going to get into some of the solutions. That's really the biggest thing we want to talk about. So what do each of you think of as some of the roots?
I think you bring up a good point about the British and their colonialism, and how, that kind of piece, even as somebody who knows the history and knows that that's what happened, is that, they got it after World War II. It just kind of gets lost in the sauce, and how they are never held accountable, which is, they're usually never held accountable for their colonialism.
Right.
But, there was the Balfour Declaration, and then after that, they were not willing to pick up any of the pieces. And for a long time, they, were not so committed to helping anybody. Like, they knew that the Jews who had returned and sought refuge were, ready to finally be back after 2,000 years in exile and establish a home again. And they sat on that for a while. And then as tensions rose with Arabs, they didn't handle that. And then as the years went on and there would be resurgences of violence and war, they did nothing to solve that either. And that's a big part of the piece that almost always gets left out of the conversation is, the one to blame for the root of the problem, which, there's a lot of different issues to the problem that a lot of different sides have blamed too, but the way that it got mismanaged and abused from the beginning is on the British. It's not on any Jewish group. It's not on any Arab group. It's on the British. And the tensions between neighbors is something that has been a Jewish-Arab issue, but the way that it was handled on a larger geopolitical issue is on the British. And it's really unfortunate that gets left out of the picture.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Jenna?
I think a big part of the issue is that the mindset and the basis of Israel being created, the motto was a land without a people for a people without, or a home, a land without a people for a people without a home, mm-hmm. without a land. Mm-hmm. And I think that in itself led to a lot of issues because that wasn't true. It wasn't a land without a people. It was a land with people that was given away by the British, who had no right really to feed into that idea of just a land that was empty and just sitting there waiting for more people to fill it. So I think that is a big part of the issue.
Right.
And it's still very present. It's just treated like it was found empty and now there's just issues out of nowhere. But the root of it is from that ideology that they came in with.
Right. And what I want to say is there's something, and back to the roots of the Holy Land, why it is the Holy Land. So being the Holy Land, then let us be defending the sacred and let us find our ways to care for each other. So this sort of the fact of not being able to share power or share the resources or share the responsibility to have a country and to manage things. That's what I was telling in the beginning, actually, that this here scarf was made by kids that are in Afghanistan. Let me see, did we figure this out, how I'll show it. That they made this it was a fundraiser. These are the Afghan peace volunteers. So they're doing programs of social uplift in a war zone, with the U.S. making things worse than it already is, and they have all their ethnic tensions. They have a bunch of different ethnic groups, and there are ethnic tensions. There are, power issues between groups and things like that. But they, in this border-free center, they work together, all the different groups. I was there. I knew them actually, you could talk with them. They would love it. We should put it together some kind of way to talk with them, because you could sign up to talk with them, or with your group or your class or your Hillel group, or your Hillel groups and so I'm getting on to solutions, like to talk with them about what they're doing in their border-free center, because they are working together with all the different, ethnic groups are coming together in this border-free center for the kids who want to do that, and they're studying nonviolence, and they're working together on all these different programs of social uplift. Like, they have a street kids school, so they, with some help from Western groups like our group, and especially Voices for Creative Nonviolence, they had enough to give children's parents some food so that it would supplement their subsistence, so that they could come to school once a week for a day. So they did the duvet project, where they paid seamstresses a living wage to make these duvets, to give them to families so that they would not freeze over the winter. So that's what they've been working on. And meanwhile, themselves studying nonviolence, studying how to get along with each other, right? So back to, the tools that we have dictate the things that we do. So if our tools are going to be aircraft carriers or bombs and, drones and, weaponized drones, and, then our result is going to be that. So, but if our tools are going to be talking with each other, listening, trying to find a way. And I want to say my dad said that he used to claim that he was not Jewish as soon as he was old enough to think. Well, we know that's not true, because he was Jewish and he was Zionist. And he was Zionist. And he told his cousin, well, everybody should go. Everybody should go be there for a while, right? That's what he said in the beginning. But then after he'd been there for a while, it might have been in the course of some of the things that were happening around the land and things that happened with the Haganah, that then he came to say that I was not Jewish as soon as I was old enough to think. And the other thing is identifying with the aggressor, which sometimes happens. So he didn't mind people knowing he was Jewish. I mean, that he was German. He had a strong German accent all his life, so but he did not, and I think it was a fear thing, too, because of his being Jewish had been, he was a hunted person for some time, as a Jewish person, as Jewish people had been, and certainly had been in Nazi Germany. And I think that also it's something that so many groups do bear, so many people bear, that we've been, our fight, flight, freeze doesn't help us. So it causes us to either fight or run or freeze, right? It doesn't lead to our listening, trying to take the other point of view, the urge to reconciliation. It doesn't, the fight, flight, freeze does not do that for us. We have to do that for us. By our habits, by our beliefs, by our principles, by our listening to each other. So when we think about what might be some next steps, first, just in the wild imagination, so what would we like to see happen there now? What would either of you like to see?
I was talking to my mom about this before, and the question that we always come back to when people have this conversation is like, will there be peace? Will there be peace soon? Will we see peace in our lifetimes? And I was talking to my mom before, and she said, you know, if you had asked any Egyptian or any Israeli in 1973 if there would ever be peace, they would laugh at you. And a couple years later, there was, and it's been quiet ever since. And same thing with Jordan in the 90s. And, you know, a lot of the time, especially when there's flare-ups in violence, you know, that mentality kind of gets lost. But there does come a time for each of these pieces that, you know, they just decide it's more beneficial for everybody if, you know, we put our differences aside and we just, you know, keep peace, because that's at the end of the day what we have to do, you know, not just because it's the right thing to do to have peace with others, but also it's more beneficial to protect ourselves. And, you know, that's why Israel made peace with Egypt and with Jordan, is because, you know, collectively, all of us from all sides decided, like, we need to be safe. And that, you know, is our priority for ourselves and for each other. So that definitely is one piece that I'm looking at.
Jenna, what would you like to see
I
as a next step?
As anyone from the like, they want to see peace. I just think it's hard to say like the same things that you were saying, I guess, because on our end, on like the Palestinian end, we don't have all the same resources, or we don't have all the same even rights. So as like living as like second and third class citizens in the country, it's hard to make peace. And when your homes are being stolen from you, it's hard to make peace. So I think,
right,
like agreeing, like just for instance, no more like illegal settlements. That would be a step towards peace, because obviously when someone's taking your home, there can't really be peace.
Right.
So they're just like small steps towards decreasing what causes the flare-ups of violence is going to eventually lead to peace.
Yeah, I think like exactly what you're saying, like on both ends, both governments need to just relax. I guess, for lack of a better wording, like it, you know, they're fighting with each other and the citizens get caught in the middle. And the vast majority of the citizens don't want any part of this and just want to go about their lives. And, you know, I wish the Palestinian Authority would get it together to stop having their people so disenfranchised. And, you know, Mahmoud Abbas in the 16th year of his 4-year presidential term. And, you know, I wish the Israeli government would stop flexing on the Palestinians just because they feel like they can. And at the end of the day, the only people who benefit from this ongoing is the extremists on each side. And none of the citizens want that, or at least the majority of the citizens don't want that. And when those small groups stop representing their people poorly, and stop being so malicious to each other, then we can come to the table again.
And I think I want to say, too, in terms of fight, flight, freeze, is there is nothing like a bunch of military and arms and armed people and checkpoints and everything else to ratchet things up. So we had it here in Buffalo when the police stopped coming in with, you know, when there wasn't like a militarized police presence, things went down. When we had the 2 times when there were serious incidents, and I mean serious, there was, you know, broken windows and a certain amount of looting. There was, you know, a cop run over by a car, a couple of cops hit by a car, one run over by a car because it was a war zone with tear gas and with everything else. So those things ratchet up the violence. So that has to stop. That has to stop. To you know, and back to, you know, I'm trying to remember. Somebody just quoted it to me. Maybe one of you know. Somebody said, "No justice, no peace." You know, no peace, no justice. No justice, no peace. You know, is that they're finding a way to share peace, to share for human rights. Actually, at UB School of Social Work, their emphasis is on trauma and human rights. I love that. I think that's so helpful, because those are the things that we need. Those are the keys to unlocking this situation, is concentrating on both those things. And then concentrating on finding, those problem-solving tools to solve the problems about the water, solve the problems about the resources, to solve the problems about the land. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the issue of resources comes into the conversation a lot, at least in my experience, because no one knows exactly where to draw the line. Because, for example, even though Israel made the decision to unilaterally withdraw from Gaza about 15 years ago, they're still responsible for their water supply. So the pipes that bring Palestinians their water are supplied by Israel, and every living human being deserves water. It should not be a controversial statement,
Right.
But Hamas takes those pipes and turns them into bombs. And, so now there's this tough position of, water supplied, but it's sent back as rockets. And what are you supposed to do? Because how can you take away water from people who need it to survive, from innocent people who need water? But also, how could you knowingly keep funding water pipes that turn into rockets? So that's a very important piece of, Hamas and Israel are fighting, and the civilians of Gaza get stuck in the middle. And that is a very large piece, and it's a piece that I think a lot of the times gets lost because people are talking about this purely like politically, this side versus this side, and never what the ramifications are for people who live in Gaza, who are caught in the middle, and how they're disenfranchised and how they need help.
So, do you have something you want to add to that, Jenna? Or any kind of response? What?
You can go ahead.
Oh, because what I want to go to, and actually we're almost out of time. This is probably the most important question. What can we do here to help? What can we do? And I mean the Western New York Peace Center. Actually, I'm also working for the Interfaith Peace Network. And you have your organizations and all. What can we do? And how can we help? And I would say we, being in this case the Western New York Peace Center and the Interfaith Peace Network, help to have our communities here find a more peace within ourselves here, as upset and concerned as people are about what's going on over there. Because that's what we can do more quickly. We can talk about what people should do over there. We can talk to our representatives about what we'd like them to do. But what can we do here together ourselves? Any ideas? Jenna?
I think a big part of it is just having conversations like this. Is definitely important on on a peace level. If we want to achieve peace, then you have to understand each other's perspectives. And I think on more of a in America, we should all be reaching out to our representatives to kind of put the pressure on them and tell them, if you're going to be sending funds to Israel, then it should be with some restrictions, like not just free access to whatever money, to be funding things that are blatantly, and I think we can all agree that killing children is not okay, hurting people is not okay. Whatever we're seeing, it's not it's not about opinion. It's just not okay. So I think putting some restrictions on that, and that would put the pressure on them as well. So, and that can only happen if we put the pressure on our government officials. So
thanks. So both of those things. So more things like this, and also telling our government officials to stop. They give their aid sometimes financial aid that we give, we call it foreign aid, and it ends up being, it's just funding our weapons manufacturers. So, but anyway, and anything, what would you say, Galia?
Yeah, I agree that definitely the money given by the U.S. government, both to Israel and to the Palestinian Authority, should be more directed towards something productive because, weapons are only useful if you give them a use. And, there's plenty of people who don't have enough resources, and there's plenty of technological and, agricultural, every other thing that we need for our society. There's plenty of investments the U.S. can make in those, and they should be making them in those instead of adding fuel to the fire. And I think, going back to your original question, is the biggest issue I've seen from an American perspective of somebody who's watching what's going on is the way that social media has played a role in this, and how misinformation spreads like wildfire on social media. And, someone will publish something without fact checking it, without, learning the history, learning the nuance. And, if it's on one of those big, social justice Instagrams, it could be totally full of misinformation and get 1 million likes. And now that's what people take away from this conversation. So I think that providing reliable, substantive resources to people who are interested, instead of, getting all of our news on social media from people whose stake in this is not a serious one, and whose stake is to just, present themselves on social media as like a social justice warrior, I guess, and to really, be mindful consumers and to really have meaningful resources, because so much of what I have seen has had, misinformation, lack of context. A lot of stuff I've seen has had blood libel that's all been very, very dangerous, and has also led, I can only speak from my side of my experience, but a lot of it has led to this rise in anti-Semitism that we're seeing in the US. And that's why that's happening, is because people who, they don't have to think twice because they will not face the ramifications. People share something without learning about it, and then that's their takeaway, and that spreads really fast. So that's a big issue.
So, thank you. So we're just about out of time. Let me just ask, so do you think also, as Jenna was saying, that this kind of thing is helpful?
Yes, for sure.
So what I'd like to say is, I would like to offer we could have even in-person gathering, or another thing like this, or whatever. But so, to be continued about what we can do. I think it's very exciting to think about getting, both of your groups together with our group, or with the Afghan Peace Volunteers or something, and talking about, what can people do, what can we do, to get control over these governments that are not putting people first, but putting, fighting first, actually. And power issues, rather than communication and cooperation and truth and love. So I want to say, I am so grateful for both of you coming. I hope this was what you.
It was good. Yeah.
Good. Well, it's great to be here with both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you both for coming on. Thank you both for all you've shared. Thank you for the good ideas about good information. We need good information. We need to keep talking, listening, and learning, and sharing together, and finding our common ground, and having our open mind and our open hearts. So thank you both so very much for all your sharing, all your wisdom. And we've been talking peace, and together we are talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, great job. Great job. You both really, really just wonderful. Just wonderful. So, do you feel happy?
Yeah.
I do. We haven't solved everything, but we made these couple little baby steps towards doing something useful. So together. So thank you both so much. Toda rabba, shukran. Thank you
Shukran.
both so much. I like to give you a big hug if I could. It's very
Thank you.
courageous of you to come on and do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a jillion.
you.
Thanks
Thank
a jillion. Call me anytime. We'll talk. Let's talk about what we can do together. We'll do
Definitely.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Have a great-
care. You too, both of you. Thank you so much. Yep, we'll
Thank
talk
you.
soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.